Welcome back to episode 2 of Bauhauspuls. Hier ist Manon,
Patti, Kaya, Mia, Nora,
Lily,
und Bruno.
So due to the current situation with the global pandemic going on, we're recording the Bauhaus-Podcast over an online platform. So we excuse if the quality perhaps isn't as good. We're trying our best and we hope that you still enjoy.
Wir sind eine Gruppe von kunstinteressierten Studenten und Studentinnen und zusammen sind wir das Junge Bauhaus. Seit 2017 sind wir zusammen mit dem Bauhaus Agenten Programms dabei. Wir wollen noch mehr über die Bauhausbewegung herausfinden und wie das heutige Leben beeinflusst hat.
Last episode we found out a bit about what Bauhaus is, but we wanted to investigate more into the everyday life at Bauhaus because we're not entirely sure what the atmosphere was like, what the student life was like at school. We decided to explore this topic further.
To get a deeper insight into the people that shaped the Bauhaus.
What I want to find out today about the student life at Bauhaus would definitely be their life outside of class, as well as relationship to their teachers.
Maybe also fashion, and I heard a lot about these Bauhaus parties that they had. That was kind of like the main social gathering for them, and kind of what that looked like.
I would also be interested to find out how the Bauhaus student movement, or how it was perceived in the bigger society.
How this everyday life influenced the atmosphere at Bauhaus.
This topic is a bit difficult to explore on our own, so we thought we'd turn to an expert.
Adriana Kapsreiter, die wir jetzt auch im Videochat vor uns haben.
Möchten Sie sich mal kurz vorstellen?
Mein Name ist Adriana Kapsreiter. Ich bin promovierte Kunsthistorikerin und arbeite am Bauhaus-Archiv gerade an einem Forschungsprojekt, wo es um Walter Gropius und Alma Mahler geht und um ihre Liebesgeschichte.
Willkommen zu unserem Talk.
As I was reading background information in preparation for this, I thought this sentence stood out, and that was that nightlife at the Bauhaus claims the same importance as daytime activities. And apparently when you were applying to this school, you didn't really need a lot of artistic talent. You only needed to be healthy. And also one criteria is that you had to be able to dance, or that du musstest locker sein. And apparently that was also one of the criteria to apply, which I thought was quite interesting.
Interesting.
That's dope. I love that.
Der Aufnahmeprüfung.
Apparently you sent in your autobiography, which was important so that they know like what type of person you kind of are, what past experiences you have, and if you're going to fit in with the other students. And then a photograph you also had to add. And otherwise, education and training are not as essential requirements as a lively, alert temperament, a flexible body, and an inventive mind. But I think there's also a difference between Bauhaus at the beginning and then how it developed. Also, there's probably also shift in requirements and what kind of students maybe were accepted.
Also als ich recherchiert habe ich gesehen, dass die jungen Leute damals in bescheidenen Verhältnissen gelebt haben. Es war ja auch die Nachkriegszeit. Ich habe mich gewundert, wie das sich dann auf die Atmosphäre auch ausgewirkt hat.
Am Anfang hatten sie auch gar keine richtige Schule in dem Sinne, sondern hatten vielleicht ein Klassenzimmer, wo sie zusammen gelernt haben, aber hatten noch nicht diese Wohngemeinschaft, was später ja eine sehr prägende Rolle gespielt hat für die. Sondern die haben ja auch fast sogar draußen auf der Bank geschlafen, oder es war ja Nachkriegszeit und es gab nicht so viele Möglichkeiten.
Yeah, and I think this obviously contributed to the sense of community as well, because they had shared difficulties or struggles in the time after the war. So the school building was often cold, and so they had to get coal themselves to heat it up and cook their own food with like fruits and vegetables that they grew in their own garden. I think this also probably really helped in the sense of like family and community, because they were working together on this group project, which was more than just going to school and then going home afterwards.
Also ganz am Anfang war es ja wirklich eigentlich eine improvisierte Schule. Also Walter Gropius, der wirklich damals noch um jeden Pfennig kämpft, damit die Studenten überhaupt auch leben können am Bauhaus. Einerseits ist dann so eine ständige Tatkraft und Kreativität und was können wir noch machen. Andererseits identifiziert man sich natürlich auch viel mehr mit einer Schule, wo man so viel selbst aufbaut.
Yeah, it's true. I guess any student, especially in the beginning, had to be really dedicated. I guess that also helps building this community. They all have something in common and share these like hardships that they're going through, I guess. And I guess that then also is reflected in their art.
Man hört und liest auch immer viel über diese legendären Bauhauspartys. Wie sind die denn zustande gekommen? Oder was für einen Einfluss hatten die denn wirklich aufs Everyday Life at Bauhaus?
Also das zum alltäglichen Leben, zum Freizeitleben muss man die unbedingt dazu nehmen. Es gibt sogar WissenschaftlerInnen, dazu würde ich mich auch zählen, die sagen, dass die Bauhauspartys eigentlich am allermeisten Bauhaus waren, weil alle da kreativ sich irgendwie ausgedrückt haben, schon ganz am Anfang. Und diese Partys wurden ausgebaut und wurden immer aufwendiger und immer größer. Und das war dann eben zunehmend auch die Idee von den Partys, dass das eigentlich Gesamtkunstwerke waren. Und auf diesen Partys gibt es ja keine Hierarchie. Also es ist dann egal, ob das der Bauhausdirektor ist oder der Erstsemester, alle feiern zusammen und es ist so eine Community.
It's interesting how the parties weren't just, for us a party, you go there, you have a nice time and you go home, but this party kind of also played a role in the classroom, that they would create the costumes in the class, or that they actually had a Bauhaus band. Apparently they had a jazz band with an accordion and a xylophone and saxophone, and these were all a mixture of Bauhaus students and even teachers who would join. And apparently also at one of the parties they had a boxing match, and Freitag Wopius was boxing with his students, and it was just so much more than a simple party that you went to and had a nice time. I think it really showed the sense of community that the school had.
Every class they had would contribute something to how the party would essentially come together.
Yeah, then they also have a slide or something that I'm not sure which.
Oh yeah, it was this famous Metall party.
Exactly, and this is I don't know, something that's very unique to the Bauhaus. I don't think that there's other schools that really do that, at least none that I'm aware of.
Die einzige Party, auf der ich war so, wo auch Lehrer da waren, war vielleicht der Abiball. Und das war ich glaube, das war eigentlich nur so locker, weil alle getrunken haben und weil es das Ende der Schulzeit war. Ich glaube, wenn wir während der Schulzeiten so eine Party mit den Lehrern gehabt hätten, dann wäre es irgendwie so ein bisschen awkward gewesen und die Verhältnisse zueinander wären schon so ein bisschen angespannt gewesen, weil man auch nicht wirklich mit allen Lehrern klarkam oder sich mit allen Lehrern persönlich unterhalten wollte.
I mean, the only experience that I can think of is that after Abitur, one of my teachers kind of invited us all to get together and have a sort of picnic barbecue thing at their house. And that was quite nice because it was an insight into, their personal life. And it was the atmosphere any different? The way you guys got along as a class and teacher together? Well, I guess it
normal?
It was sort of how, it seemed to be at Bauhaus. It was kind of on eye level. You could have conversations about life and interests and stuff like that without having that school aspect, without having that hierarchy of,
a classroom.
A classroom, exactly, and kind of obeying to those rules and those guidelines.
Perhaps in the nighttime, those distinctions went a bit more unnoticed, but as soon as you were in class, the hierarchy was back.
Another thing which I find really interesting is the way the students dressed. You can see on pictures is obviously different from our style nowadays.
Gender obviously played a role, but in terms of typical gender fashion, long hair on women, that was actually all turned around. So a lot of women had short hair, which was sort of stylish in the 20s, but a lot of men would also grow their hair out.
Die haben sich alle immer wieder ausprobiert mit Klamotten. Es gibt dieses ganz berühmte Foto von den 3 Bauhaus-Ladies, die aussehen wie aus so einer New Wave Band oder so, mit so kurzen, zerwuschelten Haaren oder so ein Hipster aus Mitte. Und ich habe auch mal einen ganz hinreißenden Brief von dem Bauhäusler an seine Mutti gelesen, wo er dann schreibt, ja, und ich habe mir jetzt auch so eine Kappe gekauft, wie alle tragen, und diese ganz neumodischen Hosen, die jetzt alle haben. Dann gab es den speziellen Mazdasnan-Look, diese spirituelle, ich weiß nicht, ob euch Mazdasnan was sagt, das hat Johannes Itten mitgebracht, das war eine so esoterische Lebensreformangelegenheit. Und die hatten dann rasierte Schädel und so eine eigene Mazdasnan-Kutte. Und also das hat natürlich auch dazugehört. Und gerade am Anfang war das auch fast so ein bisschen wie eine Uniform, damit man auch nach außen zeigen kann, wie sehr man zusammengehört.
Because I mean, with any group throughout history, there's always some sort of like uniform, like depending on who, like what you identify as, who you identify with. Like it's a pretty common phenomenon. I guess you could say the same for Bauhaus. You know, there was a certain style that went along with Bauhaus because that was like the close community and they shared that sense of fashion and that way of expressing themselves.
I feel like nowadays it's also way more just a mix of everything. Like I feel like if you look at the 70s or the 80s, there's like a very distinct style. Nowadays it's not really that trendy as a guy to have long hair, or like as a girl. I mean, it's definitely...
Yeah, they wear man buns.
If a girl... Yeah, they wear man buns. But if I saw a girl with like a short haircut, like a really short haircut, you know, it's like something very daring. It's something kind of so es hat etwas Radikales, you know, because it's going against the norm. It's definitely something which shines like a lot of confidence. But I feel like nowadays I don't know, it's not as... I don't see it as much, I guess.
But I also have to add to like how the Bauhaus dress. I mean, it is still very typical 20s that. So it's, I mean, like it's different, a different style in the kind of big genre of the 20s.
Yeah.
Bauhaus wird oft als so eine Movement bezeichnet, dann als Kunststil und so weiter. Aber inwiefern könnte man Bauhaus als so ein Lebensstil bezeichnen, weil das war sehr also Leben und Schule waren sehr miteinander gebunden.
Ich glaube tatsächlich, dass das noch wichtiger war, dieses Leben, weil aus dem alles andere rausgewachsen ist. Gropius ist nun der Vater vom Bauhaus und für ihn war das wahnsinnig wichtig, diese Verbindung von Kunst und Leben, dieses Gesamtkunstwerk, dieser universale Anspruch. Ich habe ja erzählt, ich arbeite in diesem Projekt, wo Walter Gropius über diese Liebesbriefe zwischen Walter Gropius und Alma Mahler. Und da schreibt er auch immer wieder, lass uns zusammen ein Kunstwerk leben. Also diese Idee, dass es da gar keine Trennung gibt, sondern dass diese Magie der Kunst sich in alles zieht, des Alltags und das irgendwie befruchtet und wieder zurückbefruchtet. Ich denke, das war sehr stark die Idee, die Gropius am Anfang hatte.
I really love that Zitat, lass uns ein Kunstwerk leben, because I think it defines what the Bauhaus was built upon, which was also freely expressing yourself, but also doing it together as a school to achieve one goal, which was to, you know, create not only something artistically, but also functionally. I'm definitely going to remember it because I think it really speaks for a beautiful philosophy.
Dazu kommt, dass das Bauhaus so sehr ein Stil ist was gar nicht unbedingt aus dem Bauhaus kommt, sondern was danach gesagt wurde, dass das ein eigener Stil wäre. Gropius hat das gehasst. Also wenn man das Gropius gesagt hätte, ja, ich liebe Ihren Bauhausstil, dann der bekommt einen Herzinfarkt, weil der hat das gehasst. Der wollte, dass das Bauhaus eben ganz, ganz bunt und vielfältig ist.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that.
That is what our first episode was about, on how diverse Bauhaus is, and obviously it has quite a unique style, but at the same time, you can't really pinpoint what exactly Bauhaus is or can be.
What I also heard,
dass bei den Studienplänen, also den täglichen Abläufen, auch sehr auf strukturierte Abläufe sich konzentriert hat, damit die Selbstdisziplin auch sehr gefördert wurde. Wie hat er denn dann so die Balance zwischen diesem freien Lebensstil und der harten Selbstdisziplin geschafft?
The interesting difference is the way that the different directors use discipline. So, for example, in the beginning, Gropius thought discipline was very important because there was a lot of freedom because the school was just being built up and they didn't have many materials and they didn't have a classroom, they didn't really have a school. So obviously there was this sense of freedom that I guess some students kind of used and took advantage of and maybe didn't take their work so seriously. And so I think Gropius really wanted his art school to be taken seriously and therefore try to discipline his students in the best way possible so that even though they weren't very well off, they maybe didn't have a school building, that they were still taken seriously by the rest of the public and that they were actually achieving something.
Das ist das Spannende bei Gropius, beides kommt zusammen. Auch in ihm als Person, der war so ein Romantiker, Gott im Himmel, das kann man sich kaum vorstellen. Andererseits war der ein Arbeitstier ohne Ende. Und genau so hat er die Schule irgendwie auch aufgebaut, dass es diese Balance geben muss.
I think you could say that Mies van der Rohe, who was the director at the end of Bauhaus, imposed this a lot more, and that there was a much more strict atmosphere. I also heard that like a lot of students were kicked out of Bauhaus if they had political agendas, and obviously this was then around the same time as the Nazi regime and the end of Bauhaus itself.
The school also faced a lot of external hostility, like the surrounding communities and where they were in Weimar and Dessau didn't really accept them. And because they weren't really accepted by the rest of the community, I think it really led to a strong internal solidarity, and that the community itself was a lot more tight-knit.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I think sort of the response from the public was also in a way isolating, or, you know, kind of separated like the general public to the Bauhaus students. And how if you were altig as a child, or if you were acting out or being a little bit of a brat, that your parents would threaten to, you know, ship you off to Bauhaus, which I guess would now be a dream for a lot of people. But at the time, it was definitely like, oh, they're weird, they're different. You know, they didn't follow a lot of traditional aspects of society.
Yeah, the freaks.
Yeah, exactly. Like just outsiders, you know, they dressed differently. Even the way they did art was avant-garde and different.
A really important part of the everyday life was also the canteen for the Bauhaus students, because I believe they all ate together at one table.
Because it was like the time where it was out of the workspace, because obviously you can't converse so well or like understand people that you're with all the time, like in a place where you want to like work, right? So when a time for everyone getting together and eating, you can obviously get to know each other a lot more and make relationships and, you know, like see each other's perspectives on things or whatever it may be. So obviously it was important for everyone to get together in their free time.
Usually in university, maybe you'll eat with your friends or you'll eat with like a smaller group, but you won't eat like all together as one, I would say. And I think that if that's like a set thing where everyone eats together, it reminds me more of a family.
To Lily's point, that maybe like the when they all came together to have food was kind of one of the only off times they had for like their creativity. Because I mean, when they were like going out, it was arty, creative scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also that the students themselves cooked it. So like the female students were the people, well, and male, that were the people that also cooked in the canteen. So not only did they all eat together, but they also cooked together, which I think makes it like even more of a community.
Okay, so we're coming to an end now. And to finish everything off, we're going to do a quick breathing exercise. This breathing exercise was inspired by Johannes Itten's Atemstenogramm, and this is something that he did frequently with his students. So let's get started, get comfortable, relax. So we're going to take a deep breath in, hold, and a deep breath out. So the key to this breathing exercise is that you are going to breathe in for 5 seconds, but then release for 10 seconds, so you have a longer breath out. So you can repeat this as many times as you want to. I hope this breathing exercise may have helped you find peace in your day and maintained a clear mindset.
I don't know about you, but I learned a lot. Thank you. I have a much better understanding of everyday life at Bauhaus now.
I think it's great that regardless of the situation, we can still learn and continue working on this podcast from home. Next time, we're going to be discussing women at Bauhaus, or Frauen am Bauhaus, and how their life was being a female artist in the 1920s and 30s. And yeah, so thank you again to Adriana, and thanks guys for tuning in.